families, creating a lifetime of memories. Sadly, some families are denied these important moments due to the sad practice of alienation. These are families divided.
Divorce and co-parenting are a major life interruption for families, especially the kids, but also for parents and grandparents. And it's even worse in blame-filled, high-conflict cases. When parents engage in alienation by turning the kids against the other parent or grandparents, kids suffer. They're denied the opportunity to build the 4 big skills necessary for future resilience. New Ways for Families online class can help. Parents learn to use our popular BIF and EAR skills to calm the conflict and stop the hostile emails and texts. And we even have a class for kids and parents to learn together. Research shows a 75% improvement in joint parental decision-making after this course is taken, plus overall improvements for kids' well-being. Don't wait to make this affordable investment in your children's future and improve your well-being too. Start learning new ways for your family today at conflictplaybook.com.
Sadly, too many know the pain and trauma associated with parental and grandparent alienation. Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, will present an important international virtual conference on October the 13th through the 15th, 2023. The conference, entitled Alienation, The Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse, will feature world-renowned experts in the field of alienation. You'll join the conference event coordinator, Elaine Cobb, and moderator, Megan Hunter, as they introduce you to keynote speaker, Dr. Edward Kruk. Plus, you'll hear important presentations from Dr. Joshua Coleman, Lisa Rothfuss, Dr. Mary Alvarez, Chris Smith, Bill Eddy, Dr. Noel Hunter, Dr. Sue Kornblum, Dr. William Burnett, Megan Hunter, and Jordan Traeger. Join the many attendees already securing their spot for the conference entitled Alienation, The Truth Regarding the Trauma and Abuse. For information, visit familyaccess.info for all the details. This special conference is being hosted by Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights, Steel Partners Foundation, and PASCA, Parental Alienation is Child Abuse.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Families Divided TV. Today we have with us a grandmother, Ruth Markel. She's a noted author, a public speaker, and the president of RNM Enterprises, which is a leading management consulting firm. Now, she's lectured on issues many times in negotiations, and she's done many things, but the most important thing she has ever done is this. I'm going to have Ruth come on, and she's going to tell her story. I want you to be ready, everyone, please. Understand, this is an everyday mom, an everyday grandmom. She's going to speak on alienation. She's going to speak on advocacy for grandparents. And she's going to share her heart with you today. She has a book, and it's called The Unveiling. And it's a mother's reflection on murder, grief, and trial. I did say murder. And, you know, the part that gets me the most is her son was murdered. She will explain that to you. And then she was denied access to her 2 grandsons for 6 years. 6 years. All she had left of her son, Dan, was these grandchildren, and it was denied her. But I want you to understand, she did not give up. She fought for that piece of her son. she did not give up. She did not take no for an answer. She got justice for her son, and then she got visitation with her grandchildren. I'm going to welcome now Ruth. And Ruth, thank you so much for being with us today. I can't thank you enough. I'm honored that you're with us. Thank you for taking the time. It's a blessing to have you with us. And I want you to tell us a little bit, well, actually a lot. I want you to share your heart. I want you to share the story. Take your time in doing so. And I may interrupt and ask questions as we go along, but God bless you, Ruth. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much. And I have to give you a compliment, Elaine, that you have continued to keep the eyes on, the ears on, the focus on. It's not just divided families, it's the hardships. I think that's the most important point. It's not just the fact that sort of we have been declined to see children or family members and so on, but the fact is that this creates a tremendous amount of hardship and loss. And that's really a compliment to you that you're keeping the light on these very, very, very difficult topics that everybody wants to sweep under the carpet. So you deserve really the thanks. My story is actually a terrible story. It's a survival story. The topic today is called The Unveiling, and it deals with the grandparent alienation and also advocacy. And I have them both together because although I have gone through a murder, you mentioned the word already, of my son, and a crime, and had a lot of loss in between and grief, I did in the very end of the day fight back. And so this is a survival story. And I hope your listeners can sort of look at their own situation sometimes. And I have an expression, which I did before another podcast a while ago, but it holds, which is don't get lost in the loss. So it's don't get lost, L-O-S-T, in the loss, L-O-S-S. And so let me tell you a little bit about the unveiling, the topic, which is really part of the title of the book and why I selected it. So there is a practice, so our family is Jewish. There is a practice that after a funeral, several months later, there's a tombstone that's placed on the gravesite. And at that tombstone placing, there's some inscription writing on it, and there's a piece of fabric that covers the tombstone until you have a ceremony, an actual religious service or a ceremony. And it's at that point that you lift the fabric and you show the public, whoever's invited, what is written about the person who has died. But the significance of the unveiling is twofold for me, and this relates to our topic. The first one is, it was at the time, so this was about 9 months after my son unfortunately was murdered, buried, and it was horrific, but it was at the time of this unveiling service that my deep, deep grief journey started. And so one of the purposes of the book, and even our topic today, is to give voice to grief. A lot of families are facing all kinds of loss. They're facing grief from losing, even family members from COVID and all kinds of other stuff. But the school shootings, these are the things that bug me the most, okay? I'm very involved now with helping in the mass shootings in parts of the States. And look at all the families that have lost a child or have had disabled children, as a result even of the school shootings. So the book is about giving voice to grief. That's the first point. The second, though, if you can picture a fabric covering a tombstone, you have to lift the curtain, lift the veil. And it's on this part that it's a public notice to everybody of what I want to lift the veil on, which is on crime. And more important is grandparent alienation. So here we are, we experienced a murder, and then we also experienced grandparent alienation. And that's why the unveiling is lifting a curtain, lifting a veil. Let's talk about once and for all these very, very harsh difficulties that many families are going through. And that's the topic. And then in terms of learning about the grandparent alienation and moving along to what are some of the outcomes after a long journey to try to resolve them.
Well, before you go any further, Ruth, I want to let everyone know that just last week, you were awarded the 2023 Agnes Fury Victim Survivor of the Year Award. And that was remarkable. And I'm so grateful because you worked not only with your son, with what happened to him in the murder, but also with domestic violence and the loss of a child to the murder. And thank you and congratulations for that, Ruth. That's very honorable of you.
Thank you. That came out of the blue. It was really a very exciting thing, and was more exciting. It was National Crime Week, but also I was nominated by a prosecutor, which is like kind of unheard of, you know. So yeah, the victim experience is a very important part. That's another part of why I use the unveiling to expose what it is that families are going through in the trial life. So today we're a little concentrating more on the grandparent issue, but the crime impact is horrific. So thank you for mentioning that.
Of course, yes. Please continue. I'm sorry to have interrupted, but I did.
No, you did interrupt me. I'm just waiting if you had anything specific. Okay, why don't I tell you a little bit? Actually, so I told you about why I wrote the book, the purpose, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my son, because he was murdered, but we had this international acclaim from him. So his name is Dan Markel. He's a very well-known legal scholar. He went to Harvard undergrad. Now we're Canadian. We're from Toronto, and he's Canadian, and he went to Harvard undergrad, then went to Harvard Law School, and lived in Washington. He lived in many parts of the world, and he studied in many places. He was also well known for something called Prof's Blog. So it's PRAWFS blog, BLAUG, which is an unusual spelling. But he started that in 2005. Why that is important is that he came out before Facebook became public, which was in 2006. So this is really very early. And he had a lot of international acclaim. But I liked him best as a father. And why I'm telling you that is because this also relates to why there was a very harsh circumstance. So he was a father. He loved his children. There was a terrible divorce, which I'm sure you've heard on other parts of some of the other stories or commentators or experts. One of these, very unpleasant divorces with very contentious about very many issues. But the family, when Danny married, her name is Wendy Adelson, in 2006, they moved to Tallahassee, and he was working in Washington, but he moved there so she can finish her law school. She's 7 years younger than he was. And she was from Miami. Her family was from Miami area, from South Florida. They did not like the Tallahassee environment because they felt that she was going to get stuck there with her children. They had a contentious divorce, but there was no way that the judge allowed a relocation without the full family going. So either Dan could have commuted back and forth, and probably would have been willing to do it. But they divorced in 2013, and unfortunately, in 2014, Dan was shot, and on July 18th, it's a terrible story. And on July 19th, Dan was died and was considered a murder, not anything random, and so forth. So this is a very tragic story. It has a crime element, which makes it, of course, 75 times, a million times more traumatic than just, normally having the difficulties of, and I don't minimize them because I had them too, of parental alienation, brainwashed children, and, later we'll get to grandparent alienation. But what's significant here is in the first 2 years after the murder, we were allowed to see the children. So this becomes important. So Dan's father, Phil, the grandfather, and my daughter, Shelley, and her whole family, which is 3 Canadian children who are older than my American grandsons, who were very, very young at the time. The murder was in 2014. They were only born in 2010 and 2009. So they're little preschoolers still. Anyway, we did have access for 2 years, and there was no yet information from law enforcement on anything related yet to solving the crime. But then they were able to follow a car, and suddenly the whole case broke. So now in 2016, there are some arrests, and I'll just give you a synopsis of the crime because it becomes important to the grandparent story. So what happened was in 2016, Sigfredo Garcia, who became known as the shooter, he was the first person to be arrested in May 2016. And at that time, there was a probable cause affidavit, which identified Donna Adelson and Charlie Adelson as unindicted co-conspirators. Now that is, Donna Adelson is the mother of my ex-daughter-in-law, Wendy Adelson, who married my son, and her brother, his name is Charlie Adelson. So this was really, I mean, everybody there had already talked about before, but there was speculation earlier on that the family could be involved. But there's a big difference between speculation and then something coming out in a very legal document, and law enforcement and the FBI and the state attorney's office, are all over declaring that these are some of the realities of this murder. So that became important. There was another person, his name was Luis Rivera, I'll just give you the synopsis, who was the driver, and he was also convicted. And they brought in another lady, her name was Catherine McBanawa, who was the go-between. Now she dated Charlie Adelson, that's Wendy's brother. And she also was married, this is like Peyton Place, from a long time ago. She also was in a common law relationship with Sigfredo Garcia, who was the shooter, and she had 2 children with him. So you can imagine this complicated circus of all these relationships. Now, they were all convicted. So now in jail, the shooter, the driver, and the woman, her name is Catherine McBanawa, she is convicted for life, and so was Garcia. The Rivera had plea bargain. So now, in the last period of 2022, April, just exactly almost a year ago, April 21st, 2022, Charlie Adelson, that's Wendy's brother, is now in jail. And his trial is coming up in October of 2022. So this gives you the picture of a crime. 2023, you're right. Sorry about that. It was going to be in April, but you're right. Thank you. 2023. And this is very important because right now we're at like sort of another point of really a sort of fork in the case in terms of what other family members allegedly could be involved in any further charges. But what is significant is since 2016, since the arrests, this becomes how we come into grandparent alienation. We were no longer allowed to see the children, and we were cut off basically for 6 years. Do you have any questions here? Did you want to ask anything?
I wanted you to go into what you did. You got on the phone, and I want to bring out your book. I hope people can see it from here. I'm never good at this when it's on here.
Yeah, get it a little more.
There we go.
There you go.
It's called The Unveiling, and I just got it Saturday, and I've started it, and it is so good. I did put it on our website, so you can go there if you want to look. It's under the books. And this is an incredible book. If you are a parent or a grandparent or a professional, and you want to learn more about what Ruth Markel has done, get this. You know, I was telling my husband at breakfast yesterday, she's remarkable. I mean, I'm going to start crying. I'm going to try not to, but I did yesterday. But this woman was in Canada. Her children were in Florida. That's a big difference, okay? She did not sit back and wait. She had the double whammy. She had lost her son. He was murdered. Then she lost her grandchildren. But instead of pitying herself, she didn't. She picked herself up. She read all about the laws down in Florida, what kind of grandparents' rights they had. She realized she had nothing at that point, because many states have, you know, different ways they word things for the grandparents' rights. So she had nothing. And she's this long distance away from her own grandchildren. And remarkably, she did not do the pity party. Well, she probably did a little bit. And then she got to the point where she said, enough, I've got to see my grandchildren. And she started studying. She got on the phone. She got connected with legislators in Florida. And this woman got a bill passed. Once again, she's in Canada. They're in Florida. She got a bill passed for her grandchildren, specifically for those who had been in a situation like this, where their parent had been murdered, some kind of domestic violence, and she could see her grandchildren, and she got the victory. And Ruth, I want you to go through this if you would. What exactly did you have to do? I know there were a lot of phone calls, you know, just as there were when you were trying to get convictions on those people who murdered Dan, and you fought for that and you won. You're not finished. You want to get everybody involved, and we pray that you will. We pray tremendously that you will. But tell us about what you went through and the steps that you took to get this bill as a grandparent in Canada for Florida in the United States. That never stops blowing my mind. Truly.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to tell you a few things. By the way, there was not, just to clarify, in the whole murder story, there is no domestic violence. It was domestic disputes. There was already a 50-50 agreement in the divorce, marital settlement agreements. It was never related. Now, the bill that I passed, where you're right, does include domestic and violence cases, because the bill is not exclusive in any way for me. I'm going to tell you a little story, and it's an important story. So this is a story where to pass a bill or to get this kind of advocacy done, it takes a village. And I'm going to also talk about grief, because I think it's important. You mentioned something about the pity room, or whatever, I like your expression. Many people have said to me they would never crawl out of bed, if they had my circumstances. But there is a point where you are in grief too. And it does take a while to redefine yourself. And I'm very sensitive to all these families, to all these victims, and looking at the school shootings where you're a homicide, there's a problem here I want to just mention. You're a homicide survivor, which is already a trauma experience, but you also have to go through the justice system. And ours is a murder for hire, means, like I explained to you, we're going to go through now our fourth trial after having hearings and after having a lot of appeals and so forth. So how the bill came to my consciousness, and I'm explaining it to you this way, in the process of, starting to prepare for some of the trials, in 2016. We worked with a lawyer in New York, and I have to tell you, because of Dan's really his tremendous, not only his acclaim, but he was very much known as a connector as well. And as mentioned before, he was a great father, so he had a passion for these children, and we needed to continue it. But everybody around him knew that.
I want to interrupt, because
sure.
This was a part in your book that, you know, the one thing about Dan, I want this emphasized, is his life was being a dad, and that was taken from him, and it was taken from the grandchildren as well. But that really got me, that his life was being a dad. He loved his children more than life itself.
That's true. He loved his children to such an extent, and it's important. I'm really glad you took that up again. The passion for his children went that, you know, on the off days, and this is important for all of these conflictual families who are post-divorce and so forth, he went to the kids' daycare and had breakfast with them when it was not his days of custody. That was one of the things he did. The other thing that he did is, believe it or not, he put a clothesline, remember an old-fashioned clothesline, across the open space of his living room. I see a bit of background where you are, but like a large, large space, and hung all their artwork. And that was like amazing. So his children were really the forefront of everything. And that's what really made it important to us to fight for his kids afterwards, and to let them know they had other family and not to be washed out. Another thing I should mention while we're in the conflict stage, just a year after the murder, Wendy changed the boys' names from Markel to Adelson. This was before any arrests happened. So that was another really, really shocking event for the family. So you see a whole course of action, you know, prior to this crazy crime, and of which we are all, you know, still obviously very damaged and hurting from. So what happened was, after the arrest, we were cut off from the children. We had a lawyer in New York who was working for us. And this is in 2016, very early. He says, Ruth, the only way you're going to see those children, because we already tried, Dan's father, Phil, and I never went on the TV. You talked before, you know how when families have a murdered child or person, many times they go on TV. We never went out. So now that the murder happened in 2014, now we're in 2016, 2017, we never actually used the media. But after the lawyers, between our requests and Wendy's lawyer, to see if we can get any resolve about seeing the children, nothing happened. We went on Dateline because we had access of Danny's profile. The case is very well known. We went on Dateline. We went on this Wondery podcast, which is very successful, Over My Dead Body. You can, anybody who wants the publicity of the case, Dan Markel can find it. But we didn't get any success. So the lawyer said to me, look, Ruth, you're going to have to write a bill. A grandparent bill. I'm sitting in Canada. I'm sitting in Toronto. How am I going to do that? Anyway, and then I have a lot of American friends, and they said, you're going to need lobbyists. So I said, oh, okay, I'm now getting really mentored and so on. Anyway, what happens is I didn't do much for 3 years. And why I'm telling you this, I started to make the phone calls of where you're right, of what had to be done, but I needed to be finished with one trial. And it was the trial in 2019 of Garcia. And remember, we're managing personal trauma and loss from a murder. We're managing the criminal system and the justice system, which moves not so quickly. And you're overwhelmed. But I did start to take what I would call, in the first period, the baby steps. And when I finished the trial for Garcia in 2019, I was in Tallahassee. And it was at that moment that, okay, I could take a breath, and I really now needed to start the grandparent alienation issue, which is what you're looking to move towards. And I did. And this was a stroke of luck. Some people will say it's like a divine experience. I'm in a hairdresser. This is funny, in Tallahassee. This young woman comes over to me. Her name is Karen Halper Cyphers. And she says to me, can I give you a hug? I see she's Danny's age. I'm in Tallahassee. Why not, right? I'm in a hairdresser. Everything is good. I give her a hug. And then she says, can we meet for coffee afterwards? And I said, sure. So then after we meet for coffee, it's an amazing story. She says to me, what can I do for you? And I didn't know anything about her, who she was or anything. And I blurted out like this, grandparent alienation. I was sitting on it for 3 years and I said, grandparent alienation. It was like now chapter 2 of my story. And she says, done. I said, done? Who can do it, you know? So what happened was, just lucky, she happened to be, and she has still a very strong a set of connections in Tallahassee. She worked for a media company and a research. Now she actually, she was a partner. Now she actually owns it. And here we are, we put together in a short period of time, all the pieces of this puzzle. And this is amazing. This is October 2019. And we get together, you know, what are the issues? What are the concepts? She has a lot of the connections, I must tell you. I had some, but nothing, not a tenth of what she was able to do. In January of 2020, we had in the Senate a preliminary bill that Jeff Brandeis, one of the senators, and this is all Karen's team. Now we have a very big team. I'll explain to you. That got it introduced in the Senate. It passed in the Senate, but it had no time yet to get to the legislature part of the House. Anyway, we needed lobbyists. I had to do a video. Dan's friend did a family presentation and so forth. So now this is important now about advocacy. Now I'm moving really into the advocacy topic because I think I should say there's something important too that I don't want to miss a psychological step, and that's important for your viewers, which is redefine yourself. There is a point where you have to come to grips with either you're going to be stuck as in really stuck in a problem, or you're going to say to yourself, all right, I have to put this, it's time. It is time. It's a tremendous amount of personal getting out of your guts and moving it, you know, to the front stage of your life, and really just putting full attention on this issue. And that's really, I have to say, the redefining yourself is a major breakthrough, because it is so important, because we're still in the criminal system. But I was able to kind of, you know, shift legs a little bit, where I'm totally enmeshed in the criminal life and the justice issues. But I now have to really confront the social problem that I'm facing. And I wanted to see those kids, right? Which is the grandparent alienation. So now we put together this team. A lot of it is certainly Karen's contacts. In 2020, it doesn't pass. In 2021, and this is important in advocacy, where we didn't try to pass a bill. They worked on the bill language, because the bill language was the blocking point of whether we're going to have success or not. Florida has very restrictive grandparent rights. With all of the retirees there, and I should explain to you, it's not only they had restrictive grandparents' rights, but what is unique about Florida and not like other places, it's the actual rights of the natural parent for autonomy and privacy. And you can't move those rights for the benefit of the grandparent legislation. Now, other states and provinces don't have that. But the natural parent in Florida, you can't budge basically their autonomy and privacy rights. And that's very unique. So that's why the bill language took a whole, second year while the legislature was open. And then finally in the third year, in 2022, which is our biggest breakthrough, we had success. And what happened was the Senate passed it unanimously. The House passed it, I think it was 100-3, maybe, like nothing. So also very good. Governor DeSantis signed it. in June of 2022. And we actually, with the pressure of the bill that's now available and called the Markel Act, so Wendy, that's Danny's ex-wife, told us in February, she could watch what's going on now. Like, right, there's a trial coming up on Catherine McBanowa. There's now the legislation is passed in the House and passed in the legislature. And she said, okay, if you want to visit, come to Benjamin is the oldest boy. He was going to have a bar mitzvah in May of 2022. And we said, yes, of course, we're waiting for a visit for 6 years. I mean, this is the breakthrough for all of us, right? And what happened was, when I thought about it, we're going to this bar mitzvah. We haven't seen the child for 6 years. We're going to stay in the back. They won't even know who we are or anything like that. So I said, can we have an ice cream visit the day before, 45 minutes. I made it so specific. I said, can we see the kids for 45 minutes? This was, the day before this bar mitzvah. And then she writes me back, well, okay, if you want an in-person visit, come now. Now we're in April. And we said, okay, we jumped on a plane, April 20th. Can you imagine? 2022, we left in the morning. Dan's grandfather, Phil, not Dan, I'm sorry, the boy's grandfather, Dan's father. And I went on a plane in the morning at 6 a.m. We saw the children and we come back to the late flight at 6 p.m. Now, it happened to be that the FBI knew we were going that day, and this is why they knew. So he calls me at the airport and he says, did you see the children? And I said, yes. And then 6 a.m. the next day, Charlie Adelson, that's her brother, is arrested. So can you imagine this drama? In 24 hours, we see the children and her brother's arrested. So this was the craziest story. And I got this call. And just to finish this part, you see, just to show you there's still difficulties, 3 days later, we were disinvited from the bar mitzvah because she felt that there's some safety issues. So we went back to politics. What I'm trying to show you, we had this phenomenal breakthrough, but then we still go back, and it's important for your viewers. I'm telling this piece because just because you get the door was cracked, a little bit, like this little part, and we had this visit, and then after that, we were cut out.
And how did
the
children respond to you?
We were so fortunate. This is an amazing story. So now there's a very big age difference between my Canadian grandchildren and the American. They're 13 and 12. My Canadian ones are 23, 19, and 16. Just before we left, I said to the 16-year-old, I said, her name is Ronnie. I said, Ronnie, do you think we can ask them to give us a hug? What are we going to do? Like, you're really stiff, potentially. She says, yeah, sure, go for it. So as the children were walking towards us from the parking lot, we kind of approached them and they approached us. And then I did it like a cheerleader, like spontaneously, which is probably the best thing in the world. I said, hi, can we give you a hug? And they said, yes. And it's amazing. You picture this, 2 adolescent boys, they hug each of us. So like that's demanding as it is on any adolescent. This is an amazing part. They greeted us warmly. We had, I don't think if I could ever plan a visit with adolescent grandchildren, it could have been better. That was the first visit was just outstanding. And then what we did, we prepared a whole, Phil had it really on his iPad, a phenomenal slideshow, so to speak, from the day they were born, all the way through to pictures till the last time we had them. So we had, all their preschool pictures. We had them from when they're baby pictures. We had all their pictures from when they visited us in Canada, when we went to Tallahassee, which was frequently. And they could see, like a lot of it they forgot because they were so small, like they were 4 years old. So this was like, they were curious. And you know, and it really was an amazing visit. And we passed the time. And I asked another friend, I mean, this is where you have to do your homework, talk about the phone calls. I asked another friend who knows what kind of gifts to give age-related to these kids. I came at least with the right, they weren't expensive toys. Whatever I brought, they were happy with, because it was something relevant to what they're in, you know, what's in today. I have older grandkids. I really don't know what's in today. And anyway.
May I say, to whom you're very close with your other grandchildren. You have
yes,
a great relationship, and that's very important.
It is fantastic. They live in Toronto also, so we're blessed, you know, that they're really literally around the corner. Anyway, so I think to say what I really want to, you know, suggest, whatever you're going to think about doing, it requires a tremendous amount of planning and really, you know, moving yourself forward. There's also something very important here too. There's a great power in community. Like, don't try to solve these problems alone. And I do want to share with you, I don't know if you're aware of this, it's quite active in parts of Ontario, but it's active in the States. There's something called Alienated Grandparents Anonymous. Are you familiar with that organization?
Oh, yeah, they're in Florida.
Yeah, they're in Canada too, yes. And they seem to have, you know, significant chapters of you know, ways of working. And I think advocacy is really important. I met, by the way, on a podcast this last year, Carolyn Leitner, who's the founder of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And because now we're dealing with children where parents have lost, you know, unfortunately, I'm not in the grandparent story at the moment, but I'm saying where there's a lot of advocacy. And you know, she has a new group now, Save Our Lives. There's another one, I hope none of your listeners need any of this, but Parents of Murdered Children. So what I'm trying to say now is we created our own community in Tallahassee. This was no question of that. I needed champions like Karen, this woman, Karen. I mean, she was amazing. We had a network of friends. There was not everybody supportive of this. You know who was against the bill, the Markel Act, was some of the family law lawyers in Florida. And so what I want to show you is, like, this is when you go for advocacy, when you go to create any kind of bill, you're not standing freely, like there's people and obstacles. The other thing to talk about is we did in the very end, not at the beginning, we did have an ally with ARP. You know, they came and represented the grandparent issue in one of the hearings. So in 2022, we had sort of a bit of a broader representation right in the legislature, which helped us. And some of the other groups, the adversaries, which were there before, were like a little less, how do I say it? Their voice was more quieter because they could see that we were having, you know, this tremendous support. And the bill language, now I'm going to talk a little bit about the bill language. The bill language of the Markel Act is so specific, though, because Florida's laws are very restrictive. The bill language only can be used for families where one parent is deceased and the other parent, this is the new piece, the other parent has been, there's findings about them either criminally or civilly related to the death of the other parent. So it's not a broad-based legislation, but it's very, very specific. And I've been getting all kinds of calls. I mean, there are hardship stories of other families, you know, needing to know how to use the legislation, you know, what they can do. And the grandparent alienation everywhere is very big, not just under social issues, but today, and particularly in Florida, an adult child is in jail for a felony, could be related to substance abuse or anything else. The grandparents are taking care of the kids. I'm not sure, I have to get the statistic. I'll send it to you if I find it. I believe there's something almost like 7 million grandparents taking care of children now in the States. I'm not sure if that's accurate. I have to find it exact, so I don't want to say it. But why I'm telling you this part is when the adult child comes out of jail, the basically they take their kids back and they don't say thank you to their own family members, and they say hands off. And so it creates another whole cycle of grandparent alienation. And I know you suffer that yourself, and I'm really, really sympathetic. And I really hope that, you know, my voice and other voices, we have to make this known as a huge social problem, the actual grandparent alienation. And I'm appreciative of your program, because I think you're doing something to so many families that are suffering.
Yes, we are really happy to be able to help people with this. I know, like with my situation, I did do a pity party for a little while, and then I said, enough, I've got to get up and do something. And that's when we started Family Access, Fighting for Children's Rights. And then last year it grew into Families Divided TV. But again, our granddaughter's going to be 12 there next month, and we've never seen her. So we pray for the families. But what I emphasize here, Ruth is a remarkable woman. She was sent Karen. God sent Karen as an angel to her to help her. And we must understand that we can't sit back and wait. We can't be a silent voice. Our grandchildren have no voice. They have none unless we get it for them. This law protects Ruth's grandchildren now, because now they can see their grandparents because of a law. And yes, she could take them to court. And in doing this, she knows for sure, she's confirmed that she does have rights in the state of Florida. And Ruth was willing to do that. She was willing to go to court. We are too, but North Carolina doesn't have it. But this has inspired me again to go back and try again, as we did before, but we failed in North Carolina. But we're going to try it again. But Ruth has done much for her grandchildren. She's building a relationship with them, nonetheless, you know, baby steps, little by little. And she's going to be able to keep that part of Dan. And I know this honors Dan. I know that he is saying, you go, Mom, you know, in heaven. And he's letting her know that I'm so happy and proud, and thank you for not giving up on my children. And that's very important. And I just want to thank you, Ruth. You've been remarkable. I can't emphasize enough. Folks, please get this book, The Unveiling. It's on our website. I got it at Amazon, and it's remarkable. And I'm going to invite Ruth back again in October. She's going to go back to court, and I'm going to, if you would, Ruth, I would like to have you back on and with an update.
I would love to come back, and hopefully by then, you know, we had another visit since then, and I think that so I think it's very important, and I just want to say that what's important here too, with if there's a chance to do legislation or whatever, we didn't have to use the legislation to get the visit. It was really, we would have to do a civil suit first, but that's not the point. It was the idea that there was going to be a law that changed some of the behaviors. That's the better way of putting it politely, and I think that does become important. And I also want to say, you know, don't give up hope. And a lot of people are traumatized from the circumstances. And I, you know, we all know what, you know, post-traumatic stress is. And now we have to look at what is post-traumatic growth? What is post-traumatic change? And how do we move the next step? And it is baby steps, and there's setbacks as well. I think that's an important point too. You're not going to win it all. And you know, and just really pick yourself up and you know, and keep going.
Yeah, and the timing is everything, because in Ruth's situation, Wendy, I'm certain, was paying attention to this bill because it was called Markel, so she absolutely knew. And so the very next day, I think, she contacted you you may come and visit the children.
It was passed, it wasn't signed yet, but it was
Right.
in between. Right, where you're right about right after in the legislature in that period of time. Yeah.
Right, it was passed, and she knew it was inevitable because Governor DeSantis is definitely pro-family. So we want to thank him for that as well. But I just am real grateful for you, Ruth. Thank you for all you're doing. We're going to be praying much that the first part will be settled and completed by the next time you come back to us. We pray that by October, all of those who are, involved in this, in the murder of Dan, will be convicted and brought to justice, because we want justice for Dan. He deserves that, and we pray for his children that God will take care of them and keep them safe, and mentally, emotionally, and physically, through this time. And Ruth, I'm praying for God's strength and grace for you. If anybody needs it, you do. And I'm thankful that God is leading you the way he's leading you. He's opening the right doors, bringing you someone in a beauty salon, no less, and there she is, boom. And God said,
it was, it's true.
Here she is, Ruth. She's going to help you. And so thankful that you have that. And I pray that the right people will be there, the right doors will be open, and the right ones will be closed that need to be. Everything will be in the right accord for this. And we look forward to having you back on as soon as possible. I'm going to keep up with you.
Good, please do. Thank you.
Absolutely. We want our people to know. We want this information to be at the forefront of what's going on. And we have many hundreds of thousands of views already, and we want to make sure people will be notified of this. And I want you guys to share this video if you would. Thank you for many of you who do share our videos. And I want you to take this and share it all over your social media. This needs attention, okay? Many dads have been murdered because of divorce and visitation. And we've seen that. We've seen how that happens. And for Dan's sake, let's get this out there, okay? We want people to know what's going on. And we want him to be able to have the justice he deserves. And we want this grandmother and grandfather to have visitation with their grandchildren and a relationship with them. That is the only thing they have left of their son who was murdered. And we want them to have that. And so help us do that, because I've seen you do it. I've seen how you guys work in social media. And when some dad or mom has been murdered because of visitation, or in his situation, she wanted to move into another city, and then for some mysterious way, he was murdered, we'll say, allegedly. Well, he was murdered. But we do want people to know what's going on. So share this video, people, okay? Thank you for doing that. And get the word out. And Ruth, we will have you back again. We look forward to it. I'm very excited for you that you have finally, after 6 years, gotten back to your grandchildren. And God bless you. And thank you so much for being with us today.
And thank you, and sending you lots of strength. Keep marching on. You're doing a great service. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. God bless.
Take care.
Everybody, take care. We'll see you next week on Families Divided TV. Thank you for joining us. And again, share this video. share the mess out of it, okay? Because we want this one out there. This is so vitally important. So good night.
Hello, I'm Edward Crook, and I'm pleased to be the keynote speaker for the 2023 Family Access International Conference under the theme Alienation, the Truth Behind the Trauma and Abuse of Alienation. And the title of my presentation, which is The Trauma of Parental Alienation as a Form of Family Violence and Child Abuse, is directly in line with the theme of the conference. And I'm very happy about that because at the center of both my practice as a social worker and also as a family mediator, and at the core of my teaching and my research over the last 30 years or so, which has been all in the realm of children and families, is a focus on attachment and loss. I've really been honed in on the experiences of parents and children who are forcibly separated from each other. And I've always adopted from the beginning, over the last 30 years, it's always been at the center of my practice is a trauma-informed approach. The interventions that I utilize in practice and the practices that I teach in social work and family mediation are very much trauma-informed. What is unique about parental alienation? That it's a kind of a unique form of trauma, a unique form of complex trauma on many levels. First of all, it affects both targeted parents and their children in parallel, and practitioners in the field are really challenged in regard to intervention that is directed at both child and parent. Secondly, it's an unresolved form of trauma and of abuse. It's ongoing. It remains unresolved. I noted that from the beginning of my research with traumatized parents and their children. It seems to never, that there's a full-scale grieving process, a full-scale trauma going on, but it's ongoing and it's never really resolved in many cases. People get stuck at different sort of points of the bereavement and attachment and loss continuum, and thus it presents challenges. It's an immediate kind of urgent crisis for people. It doesn't seem to get better with time, the trauma. Thirdly, it's both a form of individual abuse and collective abuse. That really makes it very complex and requiring a multifaceted approach, not just at the individual level, but at the sort of systems level. There's both an individual perpetrator involved in the abuse, but it's also a collective form of abuse in which social institutions such as the legal system, the child welfare system, the courts, it's both, individual and collective abuse, in that it seems that we're working with a system that's invested in maintaining the status quo and doesn't really deal with parental alienation all that effectively. Now, what you'll get from me in my presentation will be, I guess, a more radical view of reform that's necessary. I'm going to focus also on diagnosis and assessment of parental alienation. It's really not that hard to diagnose violence and abuse and trauma and alienation. So why do we keep getting stuck in that regard? I'm really going to kind of focus on a practical approach to the reduction of harm and elimination of parental alienation. But my focus is mainly going to be on systemic change and the need for that, and how everyone has a responsibility toward addressing the alienation. It seems that the system, so-called the system that so many parents talk about, seems almost tailor-made to not only perpetuate parental alienation, but to create it, to cause it, in that it polarizes parents. There's sometimes potential for healing, and reconciliation in the sense of not kind of cutting someone out of the picture in a child's life. This primal wound that is parental alienation can be prevented through systemic reform, removing those who profit from the adversarial system just right out of the picture. At the very least, you'll find my perspective to be thought-provoking, and the ideas that it stimulates will challenge these so-called received ideas that you've received over the years. And I'm looking forward to challenges, questions, debate, discussion, whether you're a parent, a politician, a policymaker, or a family practitioner in the legal or mental health fields. We all have a role to play in reducing harms, ameliorating alienation, and eliminating alienation. We're all responsible. I look forward to the conference, and thank you for your time today.
On our next Families Divided TV episode, Gil Freeman will be speaking on Court Watch, protecting children and families subjected to court proceedings.